Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to 21st Century Philippines and World Literature. We are already at our 16th week, and for week 16, our topic is about African and European literature. So, for this one, we will know the history of the African and European literature in both eras as well, and also the literary works during these eras. So, once again, for this week 16 lesson, I will share you some videos that I have searched in YouTube in order for us to furthermore understand the African and European literature. But you may also refer to your handouts and PDF files as well for more information. For this one, I will show you the video discussion uh, that we will be presenting in our this PowerPoint presentation. So let's proceed to our videos. So once again, I will just post the video links in our GC or also in our Google Classroom as well. So let us watch the videos that I have searched in YouTube. So this is very informative and it has a great discussion. So let's first watch the European literature.
Welcome back to 21st Century Literature class, your journey from the Philippines and the world. Last module, the instructor discussed about essay and its elements, structuralism, and the literary piece Home of the Asheville by John Jack Wigley. Do you still remember them? Great! For this video, I will bring you to the continent of Europe as we discover European literature is all about. Are you ready? Before we proceed to our discussion, let us know our target goals for this video. First, identify the representative texts and authors from Europe. Second is to write a close analysis of the text by applying a reading approach. Next is to compare and contrast the various 21st century literary genres and their elements, structures, and traditions from across the globe. And lastly, produce a creative representation of a literary text by applying multimedia and ICT skill. Let's proceed to the history of European literature. The dominance of European culture is reflected in and even partly brought about by its literary tradition. Since ancient times, writers from Europe have produced landmark works of literature. Today, European classics are studied, appreciated, and emulated worldwide. In our exploration of this staggering literary tradition, let us look at the emergence of European literature across different time and periods. The beginnings of European literature go all the way back to circa 750 BC. During this time, two important works were conceived. On the other hand, the Old Testament of the Bible was starting to take shape. Composed of 39 books, written originally in Hebrew, the Old Testament consisted of several genres, including tales, lyric poetry, and histories. Between 750 BC and 350 BC, different authors composed the works that would make up the majority of the Old Testament. As the dawn of the Common Era approached, Greece continued to be a cultural juggernaut. During the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, the Greek drama blossomed. Playwrights of comedy flourished during this time. Lyrical poetry was also strong, thanks to writers like Pindar and Sappho. Of note are the varied works of the great philosophers Plato and Aristotle. Another prominent name during this time was Ovid, who wrote a very long narrative poem entitled The Metamorphoses. Rome also produced literary giants in poetry, drama, and prose. The Middle Ages were marked by the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire. During this millennium, Christianity and Islam rose to become political, social, and cultural institutions. Two notable names from the religious aspect were St. Augustine, whose The Confession and City of God remain spiritual pillars to this day, and Dante Alighieri, was the three-part Divine Comedy envisions and a Christian soul's journey in the afterlife. Warrior cultures which trace their roots to Homeric epics also endured. This was evident in the emergence of epics like Beowulf, the Song of Roland, the Song of Maesydd, and the Song of the Nibelungs. In addition, Geoffrey Chaucer earned a title as the father of English literature with his crowning achievement, the Canterbury Tales. From the mid 14th century to the mid 17th century, cultures across Europe shifted their focus toward humanism and classicism. On the political end, the collapse of the Roman Empire was followed by the emergence of England, France, and Spain as political powers. But Italy remained a hub of culture as writers like Petrarch, Boccaccio, and Machiavelli produced acclaimed works. England, of course, had Shakespeare, whose poems and plays had become hallmarks of world literature. France brought Michel de Montaigne to the literary scene as the pioneer of the essay, while Spain contributed Miguel de Cervantes of Don Quixote fame. In the neoclassical period, reason was thrust into the foreground as it dominated all aspects of European society. Philosophies like rationalism and empiricism shone in the limelight. As such, French writers were prolific, with the likes of Voltaire and La Fontaine excelling in multiple genres. The Romantic movement came about as a response to neoclassicism.
Realism and naturalism rose to prominence in the 19th century. Being similar, philosophies, realism, and naturalism aimed to present life as it is. These perspectives were concretized in prose works like novels and plays. Famous French practitioners of fiction included Dumas, de Maupassant, and Zola. Their peers in England were Dickens and Hardy. Russian fictionists rose in the spotlight as well as Chekhov, Tolstoy, and Dostoevsky at the forefront. In drama, Ibsen of Norway and Shaw of Ireland made a name for themselves. Poetry was still in good hands with the likes of England's Tennyson and Browning. Modernism is an umbrella term that referred to early 20th century literary movements like symbolism, expressionism, and futurism. The period after World War II is referred to as the postmodern period. With technology advancing ever so rapidly as each decade progressed, international transportation and communication became more efficient. In literature, postmodernism is characterized by reinventing or reframing of past works and the displaying of sympathy towards minorities, colonized people, and the feminist movement. Notable European writers in the postmodern period included Italy's Calvino and England's Fowles. Let's have the characteristics of European literature. Key characteristics of this period include an interest in the common man and childhood, emotions and feelings, the awe of nature, emphasis in the individual, myths, and the importance of the imagination. European literature includes in many languages. Among the most important of the modern written works are those in English, Spanish, French, Dutch, Polish, German, Italian, modern Greek, Czech, and Russian, and works by Scandinavians and Irish. Important classical and medieval traditions are those in Latin, Ancient Greek, Old Norse, medieval French, and the Italian Tuscan dialect of Renaissance. In colloquial speech, European literature often is used as synonym for Western literature, which is a part of world literature. Philippine literature and European literature, a comparison. Philippine literature, oral transmission was the primary means of communicating and preserving Philippine literature during pre-colonial times. Colonizers brought their own influences to our culture. Our literary trove had already amassed an abundance of folk sayings, stories, and songs. Other forms of literary genre in pre-colonial times are riddle, which went by many names such as bugtong in Tagalog, paktoton in Ilonggo, buborsya in Ilocano. Riddles relied on talinhaga or metaphor, that is guessing game of objects represented by other objects. Proverbs is intended to teach values and in Lent is epics, which featured local heroes taking on various adventures. Legends appeared to have bases in real life, and fables were short tales that usually highlighted animals. Love songs were hugely popular during those times, which used as courtship songs, serenades, and lyrics for unrequited love. Lullabies, meanwhile, existed for the sake of putting infants at ease. While the European literature, the dominance of this is reflected in its literary tradition. It began during 700 before Christ. Two important works were conceived. The Old Testament of the Bible was starting to take shape, composed of 39 books written originally in Hebrew, consisted of several genres, including tales, lyric poetry, and histories. Traditionally attributed to Homer, these Greek works were believed by some scholars to have been composed across centuries by poets using oral tradition. While the Old Testament was primarily religious and moralistic, Iliad and Odyssey chronicled the destinies of Greek heroes, like Achilles and Odysseus, who embodied the war culture. The legacy of the Greek culture was later preserved by the Romans, who modeled the empire and civilization after the Greeks. On 27 before Christ, when Rome became an empire, the ruler Augustus Caesar needed a literary work that embodied Rome's greatness. Ovid, who wrote a very long narrative poem entitled The Metamorphoses, and Virgil was renowned for Aeneid, an epic modeled on Iliad and Odyssey. They also produced literary giants in poetry, drama, and prose, such as Horace, Seneca and Plautus, and Cicero and Apuleius.
So for the part two of the literary literature, so I will just
Welcome
post
back to the
the
21st century
uh,
literature
video, or also I would present it to you now. So we have the part two for the European literature.
class. Your journey from the Philippines and the world. Hola, bonjour, hallo, ciao, or in English, hello. I am Mr. Joshua J. M. Navigar, and I will be your instructor in Questa Legione, or in this lesson. Greek and Roman myths have a lot of stories concerning other deities, demigods, and even human. Some of them had a happy ending while some ended tragically. It's funny how some of the stories reminds me of novels and fairy tales written centuries after, which made me wonder if these Greek and Roman tales inspired those authors. Eight Tales of Lovers showed how they fought for their love and accepted their fate. Here are the eight brief tales of lovers written by Ovid: Pyramus and Thisbe, Orpheus and Eurydice, Ceyx and Alcyone, Pygmalion and Galatea, Baucis and Philemon, Endymion, Daphne, Alpheus, and Arethusa. Let's have first the background of the author. Publius Vidius Naso, known as Ovid. He was born on 20th day of March, 43 before Christ, to 1718 after death. He was the first major Roman poet who lived during the reign of Augustus. He is often ranked as one of the three canonical poets of Latin literature. He was considered as the Latin love elegist by Imperial Kilatan. Let us unravel one of mythological story in Eight Tales of Lovers entitled Pyramus and Thisbe by Publius Ovidius Naso, known as Ovid. But before that, let me give you a short background of this story. Pyramus and Thisbe are a pair of ill-fated lovers whose story forms part of Ovid's Metamorphoses. This story references Greek mythology and the gods, as well as sets up common and recognizable myths for future stories, such as in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Now, let's start. Here are the main characters in this story. Pyramus was the most beautiful youth of Babylon city of Queen Semiramis. Thisbe was the loveliest maiden of all the East who also lived in Babylon, and they were in love. The setting of this story took place in the tomb of Ninus under a tall mulberry tree. For us to comprehend the story well, we will be using the plot diagram. Let's begin with the exposition. Both Pyramus and Thisbe always played together since they were children, but as they grew up, they started falling in love, and both of their families knew about it. But they didn't let them marry each other and separated both of them between a wall. So, Pyramus and Thisbe decided to run away together. Rising action. One day, they arrived at their usual meeting place and decided to meet each other outside the city gate under a mulberry tree. Thisbe was the first one to arrive, so she had to wait for Pyramus. While waiting, a lioness fresh from kill was coming towards her, so she immediately ran to a nearby cave, leaving her veil on the ground, which the lion shredded with her jaws. Meanwhile, Pyramus had arrived at their meeting place. As he was approaching the tree, he noticed the lioness' paw print. Pyramus was so worried as he approached the stream and saw Thisbe's veil torn and shredded. He was unable to find Thisbe and feared that she was dead. Climax. Pyramus started to believe that Thisbe was dead, so he plunged a sword deep into his side. While it was almost laying on the ground, Thisbe was trying to find a mulberry tree with white berries, but then, under with dark red berries, she saw Pyramus on the ground, almost dead. Falling action. Thisbe said her last words and later Pyramus died. Since he was gone, she doesn't have any reason to live. So she plunged into her own heart and kills herself. The resolution. With her last breath, Thisbe begged the gods that both of their bodies be buried in a signal tomb, and that the tree in the special meeting place would always bear fruit in a deep red color, in memory of their tragic love. The two can spend their life together after death. Literary criticism. The author used mythological criticism and different archetypes in this story in order for us to make our lives more significant. Mythological criticism draws on the insights of anthropology, history, psychology, and comparative religion to explore how a text uses myths and symbols drawn from different cultures and epics. When we say archetypes, it is a recurrent symbol or motif, plot, character, image, or setting that appears in art, literature, mythology, and folklore from around the world. The goal of mythological criticism seeks to understand how the story constructs the meaning in the human existence through archetypes like ancient mythology. All literature is a window to creating meaning for a human life. These are the archetypes appeared from this story. The first one is the hero's journey. There are many elements of the hero's journey archetype in this story. The ordinary world is the main characters growing up as neighbors in their Babylonian homes. Their call to adventure is when the two fall in love. The two forbidden lovers cross the threshold when they decide to sneak away and meet face to face at Ninus' tomb. Their enemies include their parents and the random lioness that scares Thisbe away and forces Pyramus to believe his love is dead. The innermost cave is when Pyramus finds Thisbe's bloody bill and assumes she is dead. At this point, he loses the sense of innocence that he once had and kills himself. Thisbe reemerges from her hiding place to find her love has perished, and she too takes her own life. Their seizing the sword is when both stab themselves and take their own lives in order to be with the other forever. The next archetypes are the unhealable wound and ill-fated love. The first one is represented through Pyramus' assumption of Thisbe's death, the unbearable loss of the other, and both of the lovers' stab wounds. The second one is two forbidden lovers who come to a tragic end is displayed as the ill-fated love archetype in this tragedy. We have also the symbolic archetypes, and these are the wall and the berries color. The wall symbolizes the physical separation of circumstances, and it sets up between two close people love with each other. The colors of the berries from the mulberry tree. The color white symbolizes purity, peace, and innocence. The red one, which when the berries are turned red, it represents blood, sacrifice, wounds, death, and violent passion. The last archetypes that we have in this story is what we call character archetypes. The hero, Pyramus and Thisbe are both considered heroes of love. The devil figure in this tragic story is the lioness who causes Thisbe to flee and Pyramus to think she was dead, ultimately leading to the tragic ending. Lastly is the star-crossed lovers, as two people who care immensely but due to their circumstances cannot be together. Pyramus and Thisbe set up the archetype of star-crossed lovers. The theme of Ovid's story, Pyramus and Thisbe, is that true love conquers all, and the plot and symbols combine together to develop that message. When the story begins, the young couple communicates secretly through the wall that separates their rooms, because their parents have forbidden their relationship. Unrequited and a sacrificial love, the main characters were willing to do anything to be together. Not even death could keep them apart. At the end, their wishes are honored, their ashes are placed in the same urn. The symbolism of these stories appeared are the wall, berries, and the mulberry tree. First is the wall. The families hate each other, but there's not much they can do about the fact that their houses share a wall, and their children share an immense affection for each other. It means that the wall can be seen as a symbol of hatred that divides the lovers as well as the love that brings them together. The second one is the berries. Pirmus kills himself under the tree with shining white berries. When he plunged the sword in his side, his blood spurted up over the berries and dyed them a dark red. This is a reminder of two lovers who would not let even death part them. Lastly is the mulberry tree. The symbol represents the sacrifice of the lovers make for each other. The moral of the story is that true love beats everything else. Pyramus and Thisbe really loved each other, and they wanted to stay together forever. An example of this is when their parents didn't want them to be in love, but they still talked to each other.
So that is for our European literature. So the next video that I will be showing is the African literature. For our African literature,
Hello, a blessed day, everyone. Today we're going to discuss on African literature. So, class, you are expected to describe the notable literary genres contributed by African writers. Identify the distinguishing features of notable African chants, poems, folktales, and short stories. List down notable literary genres of African writers as well. Is there anyone who knows about African literature? Or you have read about African literature before? What do you think is African literature? African literature is defined as a literary works created by the authors living in countries on the African continent, mainly lying south of the Sahara. In African literature, the traditions of numerous African peoples and the interwoven historical development of the cultural traditions of Europe, Asia, India, and America are intertwined. Literature of African countries is distinguished by a variety of genres that are constantly evolving and mutating. What is a literary genre? A literary genre is a category of literary composition. Genres may be defined by, or even, as in the case of fiction, length. The distinctions between genres and categories are flexible and loosely defined, often with subgroups. So class, what are the examples of literary genres? We have here examples of literary genres: chant and poem. So what is a chant? A chant is a repeated rhythmic phrase, typically one shouted or sung in unison by a crowd. A chant tends to be 2 to 4 lines repeated over and over. A chant is quick, short, and makes a point. What makes a chant? Chants tend to focus on either offensive or defensive moves. The best times to use a chant include: first, while on the sideline during plays; second, to encourage your team to be defensive; take the ball back or make a basket or goal. Third, during short timeouts and quick breaks that call for something from the cheerleaders but might not allow enough time for a full blown cheer. And finally, in Africa, chants are also used during sacred prayers and traditions. Would you like to listen to an example of an African chant? Very good. I have here an example of an African chant titled Africa by Toto Song. This is what you're going to do. I want you to listen very closely. Are you all ready? Africa by Toto Song. I hear the drums echoing tonight, but she hears only whispers of some quiet conversation. She's coming in 12:30 flight. The moonlight wings reflect the stars that guide me towards salvation. I stopped an old man along the way, hoping to find some long forgotten words or ancient melodies. He turned to me as if to say, "Hurry, boy, it's waiting there for you. It's gonna take a lot to drag me away from you. There is nothing that 100 million or more could ever do." I blessed the rains down in Africa. Gonna take some time to do the things we never had. The wild dogs cry out in the night as they grow restless, longing for some solitary company. I know that I must do what's right. As sure as Kilimanjaro rises like Olympus above the Serengeti, I seek to cure what's deep inside. This time we have another literary genre, a poem. Do you know what a poem is? A poem is a collection of spoken or written words that express ideas or emotions in a powerfully vivid and imaginative verse. A poem is comprised of a particular rhythmic and metrical pattern. A poem's main function is to convey an idea or emotion in beautiful language. It paints a picture of what the poet feels about a thing, person, idea, concept, or even an emotion. So now, do you know already the difference between a chant and a poem? Very good. This time, would you like to listen to an example of a poem? I have here an example of an African poem titled I Am an African Child. I am an African child by Echo Magred. I am an African child, born with a skin the color of chocolate, bright, brilliant, and articulate, strong and bold. I am gifted, talented enough to be the best. I am an African child, often the target of pity. My future is not confined to charity. Give me the gift of a lifetime. Give me a dream, a door of opportunity. I will thrive. I am an African child. Do not hide my fault. Show me my wrong. I am like any other. Teach me to dream and I will become. I am an African child. So there you have it, the examples of African chant and an African poem. How did you find them? What have you observed? What makes them different from one another? Where does the difference lie? Alright, since we're done with the example of African chant and African poem, let's move on to some notable writers of Africa. I want you to take down notes. So let's begin. In a continent as ethnically and culturally diverse as Africa, it comes as no surprise that the literature has emerged from it be equally diverse and multifaceted, dealing with a range of social and cultural issues from women's rights and feminism to post-war and post-colonial identity. Here are some of Africa's best contemporary writers. Number 1, Chinua Achebe, one of the world's most widely recognized and praised writers. Achebe wrote some of the most extraordinary works of the 20th century. His most famous novel, Things Fall Apart in 1958, is a devastating depiction of the clash between traditional tribal values and the effects of colonial rule, as well as the tension between masculinity and femininity in highly patriarchal societies. Number 2, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, born in Nigeria in 1977. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is part of the new generation of African writers, taking the literary world by storm. Adichie's works are primarily character-driven, interweaving the background of her native Nigeria and social and political events. And lastly, we have Nadine Gordimer. Her works powerfully explore social, moral, and racial issues in South Africa under apartheid rule. Gordimer's most famous and controversial works were banned from South Africa for daring to speak out against the oppressive governmental structures of the time. So there you are, class, the most notable writers of Africa. This time, let us continue with the self-assessment question. So this is what you're going to do for the self-assessment question number 1. I want you to read with me and answer each question carefully. Choose only the letter of your best answer. So are you all set? Let us start. Number 1. What is mostly interwoven in African literature? A. Culture and traditions. B. Food and cuisine. C. Arts and dances. D. Technology. What do you think is the correct answer? The correct answer is letter A, culture and traditions. Number 2. All are true about chance except A. It is mostly repeated. B. It is often long. C. It is quick and fast. D. It is sung in unison. What do you think is the correct answer? The correct answer is letter B. It is often long. Lastly, number 3. Which of the following is not a characteristic of a song? A. It can be written or spoken. B. It often follows measure and rhyme. C. It is vivid and imaginative. D. It is always short in nature. What do you think is the correct answer? The correct answer is letter D. It is always short in nature. Very good. So there you are for SAQ 1. For self-assessment question number 2, Class is what you're going to do. From the given definition, make a Venn diagram on the difference of a poem from a chant. You may write this on a paper. So this is the answer for the self-assessment question number 2. Poem and chant are both described as a composition of words with similar nature. The major difference between them is that a chant is set to music, while a poem is not. It is comprised of a particular rhythmic and metrical pattern instead, while a chant is a repeated rhythmic phrase, typically one shouted or sung in unison by a crowd. A chant tends to be 2 to 4 lines repeated over and over. It is quick and makes a point. Before we will end up with our lesson today, I want you to keep this in mind. Remember that chants tend to be easy to remember, so encourage the audience to get involved as well. You can do this by having one cheerleader motion them to join in with cards or by placing a few students in the stands to encourage other fans to chant along. While for poems, poets grab the attention of the audience through the use of vivid imagery, emotional shades, and other rhetorical devices. However, the supreme function of a poem is to transform imagery and words into verse form, to touch the hearts and minds of the readers. They can easily arouse the sentiments of their readers through versification. In addition, poets evoke imaginative awareness about things by using a specific diction, sound, and rhythm. Let's see how much have you learned today. So this is what you're going to do, class. Identify each of the following texts, whether it is a poem or a chant. Simply write your answer on your paper. Are you ready? Number 1. Just the same, I want you to read with me. To the children we call our future, who have no shoes to put on their feet, who have barely any food to eat, who believe in some unreal hope, but still dare to dream, wild and free. Cheers! To the folks who stand by the wayside, who search high and low for world unknown, will they ever find a place called home? Probably, probably not. We wait, chin chin. A lesson well learned. You took everything and yet left so much. You left us hanging. Do we regret the departure? We still take a long walk of shame until we finally snap, wassail. All who made the attempt to restore some peace to chaos, to restore hope to despair, you got caught in the web of toils and sacrifice to defy all odds of a better life for everyone. Now a toast to all who fought, to those who are still fighting, to those who marry in the war, to those who take advantage of the frail, to the injustice done to us, to the justice we will fight for. Bottoms up. Bottoms Up by Ama Nwama. What do you think is the correct answer? The correct answer is poem. Very good. Let's move on. Number 2. Don't cry, don't cry. Don't cry and let anyone see your mouth. There is gold in your mouth. Don't cry and let anyone see your mouth. An English translation of Kafuga, Cradle Song, Ghana, West Africa. What do you think is the correct answer? The correct answer is chant. Very good. Number 3. Walking through Africa, what do I see? I can see Inyoka looking at me. Walking through Africa, what do I see? I can see Ufuru looking at me. Walking through Africa, what do I see? I can see Inlovu looking at me. Walking through Africa, what do I see? I can see Ikozi looking at me. Walking through Africa, what do you think is the correct answer? The correct answer is chant. Job well done. Number 4. The giraffe and the elephant went for a walk. They stopped in some shade and started to talk. I wish it would rain, said the giraffe with a sigh. I'm tired of watching the clouds pass us by. Yes, said the elephant. Where is the rain? I wish I could eat fresh green leaves again. The sun is so hot and the land is so dry. When will the rain fall from the sky? Later in the day, the sky turned gray. The flying ants flew out to say, the rain is coming. We smell it in the air. And in the distance, thunder we hear. The giraffe and the elephant looked up at the sky and heard the black eagle give forth his cry. The rain has come. The rivers will flow. The dry season is over. Now the green grass will grow. Where is the rain? What do you think is the correct answer? The correct answer is chant. Congratulations!
So this is our video for African literature. In order for us to know more about the information regarding about the African literature, kindly refer to your handouts or PDF files as well. So for our week 16, we have activity 1. So kindly answer activity 1, and we also have suggested readings and also references in order for us to further understand our week 16 lesson for African and European literature. So I will just post again the video links for the video that we have presented for this discussion. So once again, thank you so much, everyone. And said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. From the book of Mark, chapter 9, verse 23. Thank you.